Hello and welcome to Coffee with CAFÉ. I'm Chef Kurt Bachman and I serve as the president of Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Escoffier is proud and honored to partner with CAFÉ in hosting these trends presentations which help fulfill CAFÉ's mission of linking the food service classroom with the food service industry. Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts is a learning community, and our goal is to help prepare students for exciting and satisfying careers in the culinary and hospitality industries. We do this by providing professional programs which are focused on sustainability, farm-to-table philosophy, and business operations. Students who choose to study with Escoffier are offered an accredited education through the flexibility of 2 residential campuses or online programs. So thank you again for joining us today, and please enjoy this week's presentation.
Different ages and stages in their learning, all with a common goal of getting ServSafe certified. I'd like to welcome you to this panel discussion with 3 very incredible educators here. Here we have Wang Worthley from Redland Middle School, a middle school teacher who's been teaching for 25 years in culinary arts. Joe Kalfus, who's at the East Valley Institute of Technology here in Mesa, Arizona, who's been teaching for 20 years. And Joey Buttendorf, sorry.
That's okay. It's okay, Di.
Yeah, New England Culinary Institute from Montpelier, Vermont, and she's been teaching for 21 years, and also as part of Community Kitchen Academy. So with this discussion, we're going to be talking about the essential topic of how to get students ServSafe Manager certified with relative ease. Well, it's never easy, but we try to do things to make our lives easier and the students' lives easier. So to kick off the session, we're going to have Wayne talk about what he does with his students.
Okay. Well, I'm a middle school teacher, and this is a program that we've incorporated about 7 years ago, started offering the ServSafe curriculum.
Wow.
I only offer it to the 8th graders as part of a magnet program between agriculture and culinary arts. And the students absolutely must pass the test. If they don't, our school gets hurt, our school grade gets hurt. So it's all about getting the kids to pass. So
Wayne,
with that being said, there's a few things we do to try to make that happen.
Yeah, Wayne, and when I first found out that you did ServSafe at the middle school level, I was floored because realistically, I've never heard of such a thing. I mean, this is like high school senior level stuff that you consider. So how do you do it, Wayne? How do you get these 8th graders ServSafe for Manager certified?
Okay, well, it is a draw. It does draw them to our school and to the magnet program. The state of Florida does have a labor law that does allow a child at the age of 14 to work. So if they're going to leave 8th grade as a 14-year-old and they're a rising 9th grader, they can work in the summertime. They can work during the breaks. They can work weekends during the school year even. And, Miami is kind of one of the culinary capitals in the country. So it's an opportunity here.
Wonderful. Let's get into what you do to get them ready for the certification.
Okay. Well, as we all know, the book has about 10 chapters. Most of the recent editions have 10 chapters. Every chapter in the book, I try to give the students some type of project that they can take ownership of, where they have a little bit of self-direction and where they want to go. So here's an example of chapter 2. They created a chart of the big 6, something that can be laminated, and they can take it in the car with them. When they're waiting at the doctor office or for their parents, they've got a laminated card they can study from.
Yeah.
This is another project from temperatures. This would be coming from chapters 5 and 6. And again, they could laminate the backside of their big 6 chart. So each student, goes through the book and reads the material where there's a temperature involved, and then they create a chart that can help them study and retain the material. Another project might deal with vocabulary. There's a lot of vocabulary words in that curriculum that's can be complicated for the middle school student. So There's no shortage of online free programs on the internet that will allow a student to create a crossword puzzle. So they like to create these puzzles and then they share them. You know, everybody creates a different puzzle and then they share them with each other and they score them. They really enjoy that. And of course, PowerPoints, you know, this comes from chapter 4, the thermometers. You know, there's a lot of different thermometers and gadgets in chapter 4. So one activity is to create a PowerPoint, share it with the class.
And these are things that the students do themselves to create ownership, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. They're self-directed, and you know the final product is their project. But they truly enjoy sharing them with the other students.
Awesome. So once this is all said and done, then let's get into your evaluation of them.
Okay, so we definitely enjoy using the KP Compass program. We use it every year, and I found that this particular program is like an added bonus to having the textbook, because there's a lot of things that the students can do in this program when I'm not physically present with them right there at that moment. They can read this material, they can take these assessments. And as you look at this chart, you'll notice there's a lot of blue boxes. Those are assessments. Those are chapter assessments or review assessments. The final 6, for example, are reviews for the entire book. And I can kind of track their progress. What I like about these assessments, I can also see the missed question. So one of my great study strategies is when we go back and look at reviewing, we'll go and find a test where the student scored low. We'll look at all the incorrect answers, we'll poll them, and then we'll specifically study those answers, requiring the students to search the textbook, find the page reference, etc. When you see the yellows, that means the student is lacking in the reading comprehension. There's something they're missing. So when they're reading this material inside the KP program, they're getting questions incorrect. And when you see green, that means I've got them correct. So prior to selecting an exam group, you know, I have to state how many are going to test and when. I'll look at this KP program. This is my first tool. And I can pull from here, maybe I'm looking at this chart right here. I could probably pull 13 kids just looking at this data right here that have a chance to pass the test.
And this is important because you don't want the students to go and fail it, right?
No, like I said before,
gray boxes.
And I was not exaggerating. They absolutely must pass. The principal tells me right to my face, he says, listen, you pick the kids, let's look over the data, but every kid must pass this test. And there's a lot riding on, a lot at stake.
That's great. You know, so yeah, the data-driven decision. But what you're saying here is this is during the 2020 school year. So this is a pandemic year. So you have a few kids who kind of fell away, right?
Yes, thanks for pointing that out. Some of those gray boxes, you know, we're in a pandemic year. Those students just kind of disappeared. You know, they're not present. A lot of them, we don't know where they're at. Some of them have left the country. Some of them log on from places like Cuba and Mexico, but very infrequently. So it's unfortunate, you know, it's kind of embarrassing, but it's the reality that we all face.
Okay, so now that you weeded them out and selected your group, let's look at how you did this year.
Yes, so we can't just look at only that data. It also, I found this test is very heavily correlated to reading level, reading ability. Yeah. So if you look at column B, that pretty much is the score on the prior slide of their performance on those assessments and comprehension. The column C is, did the student actually complete the program? Did they do all the reading activities? Did they take all the assessments? Did they participate? That's just the value I throw in there, you know, a snapshot. And then we look at their reading scores from the prior state test, which is a real significant indicator. The only problem was because we didn't test last year in COVID, we're 2 years old on our data, but a level 5 is a maximum reading score. If you look, the students in column D that had a level 5 or a level 4 on their state assessment 2 years ago passed the test on the first try, which is column F. And we usually see that if they can read well and they're completing those KP Compass programs, they're going to pass the exam. I have no questions about a 4 or 5. It's when you get to level 2s and the 3s. You'll see some there, for example, lines 9 and 10. You know, line 9 did not pass on the first try. Level 2 reader passed on the second try with an 80. However, level 2 reader on line 10 did pass on the first try with a 78. So,
right.
You know, that reading score at that age level is very important.
Yeah, 8th graders, you don't expect that level of comprehension, but somehow you did it. Let's talk about this outlier here, number 11.
Yeah, outlier number 11 is an ESOL student, came from Venezuela, spoke no English 2 years ago. So yeah, her reading score says level 1, but she's not. She's since graduated out of ESOL. If she was to take a state assessment now, she'd probably be a level 4, I would guess. So I tested her. I took a risk. I tested her. You can see her KP scores are pretty good. And she passed on the first try. And that was one of our success stories in our entire school this whole year.
That's wonderful. Applause for that.
Mhm.
No English to be able to pass ServSafe managers. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
that's great, Wayne. Thanks for sharing your techniques and your data-driven decisions. So we're in a data-driven world. So the more data points you have to make the right decisions, the best it is for you, your students, and not to mention money. All right. So let's move on to Joe. He's in a different environment here. Thank you, Joe. You're up.
Well, thank you, Nye and everybody else. It's nice to be a part of this. Here at the East Valley Institute of Technology, we're a career and technical education district, a CTED. And so we're actually fed by 11 school districts here in the East Valley of metropolitan Phoenix. We have almost 60 high schools that feed us. And if you have any clue of the geo and socioeconomic indicators of Phoenix, we go as far as the Northeast Valley, which would be Cave Creek, Scottsdale, Fountain Hills, which has tends to be very affluent mostly. And then we go as far south and southeast as Santan Valley, right up against the Gila River Indian community. So we have each end of the spectrum as far as socioeconomic, as well as everything in the middle. And then of course, all the students are bussed in for a half a day. Our program, we usually have between our 3 tracks, we have a commercial baking, a culinary, and a hospitality management track for the students. All have dual enrollment and national certification with ACF. So we try to not test the students until the end of the first year for ServSafe. And we are with special populations. We obviously limit the accommodation and that sort of thing. But what probably makes us most successful, and then now if you want to go to the next slide, we talk about some of the best practices that we've either kind of figured out the hard way or stolen from somebody else. As we all know, as educators, that's what we do. But one thing that we notice with a lot of teachers, especially statewide when we get together, is they were caught in the loop of, well, ServSafe is sanitation. I always teach sanitation in the first unit, so we're going to make them pass it before we get into cooking. What we found is that's a really difficult strategy, primarily because the students, this isn't just sanitation, this is managing sanitation, and there's a whole level of biology that goes with it.
Right.
And so we do have, we have about 40 programs that are housed on our campus, and we're lucky to have some biology and medical teachers as well. So a lot of times we can create cross-curricular collaboration. We can have those program specific or content specialists actually come in, we switch classes for the day, or they come in and help present in the same vein that they would do with their classes, especially when we're talking about the big 6 or some of the biological microorganisms. We also, because we test towards the end of the year, we tend to chunk it out a lot more. And so we really focus in on presenting something, and very similar to what Wayne demonstrated, which I've got some questions for you later on, because it was great to see. But, when we look at enrichments and we look at self-directed projects, that definitely, you can afford yourself, if the ServSafe idea becomes, instead of a unit, it's almost like a year-long journey parallel to everything else that they're using. And then we have a school-based enterprise, we have a student-run restaurant, we have a retail bakery, and then a banquet facility. So as the students are learning the concepts, they're actually practicing them. And for our hospitality management students, especially, KP Learning is actually, the way we've integrated it with them is it becomes a companion tool. So it's, we use it similar to how Wayne described, in that we look at their performance before we let them test. And we use that as kind of a predictor of how they'll do. And I won't let anyone move on to the test, as it were, until we get like a minimum 85% on 2 of the practice tests, as an example. But with what, it's basically right in line with Wayne. We want to see their performance on the KP platform first before we actually give them what we call the live test. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Joe, for that. And talk about diversity. You've definitely got a big cross section of people from all over the city, which is huge. Yeah. Arizona is like the 5th largest city. Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the nation. So, so we definitely got a lot of people. All right, and let's move on to Joey. You have a very special circumstance with your students.
Yeah.
I mean,
so I'm gonna first give you kudos, Nye, for covering the entire like demographic of student that uses KP between the 3 of us, because we have middle school, which I am just totally, Wayne, that's amazing. 8th graders, 6th, 7th, 8th graders, that's amazing. And Joe, your demographic is challenging. Mine is anybody over the age of 18 up to whatever age it may be. I actually have taught ServSafe and taken ServSafe in multiple facets throughout my career. We certified students at New England Culinary Institute for years, as all of you are aware, I'm sure. I was an instructor there for about 17 years or so, longer. But then I worked in admissions and recruitment. So Joe, I totally understand your program and being a regional technical center and the challenges that you have. And I visited many of them and have done Skills USA judging and have done all of those ProStart things and, you know, understand that demographic. Mine in particular is adults with challenges that could range from anything from being, now we're going to include COVID with that, being home isolated for a year and a half, or really it starts with maybe being jailed for 19 years for a misdemeanor crime or a felony crime that's nonviolent. It may be somebody with mental health issues that have been treated well and they are now ready to become workforce eligible. I have a very close collaboration and partnership between Vermont Food Bank and the Capstone Community Action Agency, which is a nonprofit organization that helps with housing, weatherization, you know, Head Start programs, and we have a food shelf. So the Vermont Food Bank and New England Culinary Institute about 10 years ago collaborated and created this program that's a hands-on teaching program that resources the food from the food bank that's donated to teach students basic culinary skills and give them workforce eligibility. So they don't have to leave my program and become chefs or use this as that. They can leave my program and continue their educations. They can leave my program and, you know, go be working in a dentist's office. But they may have addiction problems. They may have been in abusive marriages. They may have been in DCF custody their entire life and not able to make critical thinking decisions. And so it's quite amazing how my job now is really focused on social services, social enterprise, and teaching students to live well, again, and improving quality of life through a kitchen setting. So my students are quite different as far as technology goes, as far as the ability to have the technology to create a PowerPoint, or being in rural Vermont also, it can be a challenge, but we're working on getting the internet everywhere up here. What I want to say is, out of my classes, since I started 2 years ago at Community Kitchen Academy, the KP tool has been important to me. I wish I had it for my first group because I had the most students in that group, because that was the one before COVID. But now we have adjusted our curriculum to 5 sessions per year, 7-week sessions, and 5 students per session instead of 12 students, 3 sessions per year. So it's a small program. It's funded through Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. We have many community partners, such as Central Vermont Adult Basic Education and things like that. KP is really important to me in the process with adults who have not been in school for quite some time. And I actually have a person with Down syndrome. That's one of my students for the first time ever, a challenge. He just took a KP practice exam yesterday and got a 95%. So I'm so excited because he really uses, I think, now all three of the formats you have there, the audio, the visual, and, you know, the hearing at the same time for somebody with his kind of disability. And he's high functioning, and he works in a cafe a couple of days a week and went through my class as a solo with his assistant for 4 weeks. I customized the program for him, and now he's in class 2 days a week with the other students. So I want to say that it really is a broad range for me. I start with the ServSafe actual food handlers book, and it's a very easy workbook, work from the book kind of way to introduce to students the information. And it's a lot of pictures and it's simple questions. And as you go through to the 5th chapter at the end, it becomes harder. So I find that that's a really easy way to just say, hey, this is what we're going to be working on. Go home and take the book with you and do the first 2 rounds and do the questions, and let's review those tomorrow. And that's what we do to get them back in. And then I take the KP and put that in between that study and the book study. And so once they start in KP and I, which, you know, can take my students a few days to actually, they'll log in, then they won't go, and then they do this, and then they do that, depending on what their life is doing. But then once they get going and they really utilize the KP curriculum, they do really well. It really depends on my student individually, how they utilize that program. And they're adults, right? So it's harder for me to get them to sit, study, do it. And like you, Wayne, my students have to pass this exam eventually. So they can take it twice with me. They can take it once and then one more time within the 6-week frame, you know, or deadline of doing that. And they have to complete at least this exam and pass it within 6 months of completing their program with me. We only pay for it twice for them, and then they have to pay for it again, but they can come back and take it with me anytime. I've actually brought in a veteran NECI instructor to proctor the exam for me in person as well, because I'm the one who teaches their curriculum. I found better success with a different proctor, just because they can ask him questions, you know, if they needed to. And it's a different face in the room, and it makes them feel, he's very academic, different than I am in that way. So he makes it feel like an exam situation, but not stressful. So it works.
Thanks, Joey.
Yeah.
You definitely have a great challenge group, because, you know, you're working with adults, you know, so they have to have their own self-initiative to really want to do it. But you've done a wonderful thing to get them, to encourage them through the process and get them certified, which is a challenge, especially for
definitely.
So thank you 3 for this panel discussion. That concludes our discussion. Any questions that you might have here for the audience? We have ourselves Joe Kalfus and Joey Buttendorf. I got your name correct this time. Okay, so it looks like we have some questions here coming up on the screen. Here. So let's look at, well, Christine asked the question, will the recording be available? Of course. Need info on how to instruct, not outcomes. Well, okay, so can anyone address Thomas's question on how to instruct and not just outcomes? I mean, that's a very broad-based question. So can somebody make a concise answer to that? I'll answer.
I'll start if you want, Nye. Just because I have to leave in 15 minutes. But yeah, I'll start and answer as many questions as I can. It depends on your group. I would say, and Joe maybe can attest to that too after me, but it depends on the actual group and who they are and how you teach them. Mine are adults, like you may have seen in the discussion earlier, but I use hands-on, so I use real examples of things as well that can occur in a kitchen daily when we're in our production mode, or the next day after an academic class, I'll do it in a production mode setting and take real examples of some ServSafe information and set it up for them, or use real life examples if I can at any time. That's one way I would say.
Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest answer for all of us because we're in a kitchen and we're able to do that. Thomas, I was interested, what age group are you teaching with? Just out of curiosity, but with me with high school or young adults, what my approach is I tend to really focus on repetition. If I had to really reduce it down, it would be repetition and chunking it out into smaller pieces. And I think those two strategies seem to connect with the students a lot easier. And again, that's kind of a trial by error thing where I always felt like, you know, maybe I threw too much at them. So I chunk it out and then I really hit the repetition on it. And then like Joey said, we definitely try to connect it with what we're doing in the lab. So I think those three things are the best bet. And when we chunk it out and when we do the repetition, we're still following good instructional strategies. So we're doing anticipatory set, we're teaching to a learning objective, we're checking for understanding throughout. And that may look like PowerPoints, active participation. It may look like different modalities, whether it be kinetic or auditory or you know, video or anything like that. So that seems to be the best approach that I have. Now, I'm happy to share PowerPoints and worksheets that I have with anybody if they want to reach out. I think my contact info is, Nye, correct me if I'm wrong, but
It'll be provided to them, yes.
So I can help. Again, my stuff is either stolen or recreated, but collaboratively as teachers, we're always looking for ways to connect with the student.
With the World Wide Web, we have a worldwide of a variety of tools and resources that unfortunately sometimes we have to sift through with varying degrees of quality. So a lot of questions are coming up about KP Compass. So yeah, I think that since a lot of you have never been introduced to KP or anything like that, basically the origin, basically I started this company 20 years ago, and it's been a long time with a focus on culinary arts education. And then we, about 8 years ago, started diving our gamified learning system with artificial intelligence into ServSafe, which was a perfect fit because it gave the students the feedback, it gave the teachers the feedback, allowed them to pinpoint their pain points so you don't have to waste time trying to figure out what's wrong with what they can't figure out. And then from that, unfortunately, Wayne's not here. He was actually one of the first guinea pigs that signed up to try it out for the first time. And I'm like, oh gosh, 8th grade, this is not going to work. But he made it work, and it was marvelous to see how that flourished in that situation because those kids really took to it, and he just really did a great job at implementing it over the years. So that's the origin of that. I mean, there's a much longer story, but focused and to get success and there's my dog. And cost, actually, the cost is actually very simple. If you're secondary education, so middle school, high school, maybe elementary school. No, I don't think so. Basically it's $800 a year for unlimited students for a teacher account. So it's not very expensive. And oh, you got your dog too. And for post-secondary, it comes out to be $50 a student, which like one of our, we have universities and Hill Central College using our program, and they absolutely love it. And at that price, it works out, and the students pass, which is more important than anything else. And they have a good time learning. So that's the cost. I mean, it's a very simple cost structure, and the teachers like the unlimited on the secondary side because you could send 50 to 100 students through it, and then figure out of those which ones should take the exam and which ones should hold off till next year, and then use data to drive that decision. So that's the answer to those questions. So Roger actually responded and said that he's at a community college and the last 2 sessions were Zoom, and the testing has decreased. But well, with the pandemic here, I mean, I guess both of you could attest to it. It's a challenge to get students to learn ServSafe through remote. I mean, it's already hard enough to get them to learn in person, and then you add that that complication. So there's our questions. Anyone have any other questions for Joey or Joe about their specific situations? I think explained at the beginning of the session is that we actually continued on the discussion, the 3 of us, I mean the 4 of us, I don't really count, and actually they talk to each other. So this video, after we're done with this live Q&A with you guys, will continue on. And then it's a very awesome discussion between the 3 of them, because they actually ask each other a bunch of questions and strategies that you probably are thinking about, and just really pick each other's brain for actually a good another 40 minutes afterwards. So,
Hey, Nye,
yes,
just to respond to Thomas,
yes,
please feel free to email me and anyone else, and we can set up a time to talk or collaborate or share ideas. I'm happy to do that.
yeah, and this is one of the things I've learned is that, you know, within our industry, within our world, everyone loves to collaborate and share and work with each other. So Thomas actually wrote down his email. So did you see it, Joe? It's in the answer section.
I'm scrolling through it. I was going to try to write down my email.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? Let me go to the answer section. Oh, I see it. Okay.
And Thomas actually instructs at-risk adult ed midstream students from 7th grade on in a village in Alaska, in the bush with 12 Native students. So it sounds like kind of your situation, Joey. That Thomas actually.
We're all happy to help, and I think Joey's probably going to
absolutely
a good insight on that as well. So, all 3 of us when you look at the age groups. So
yeah, absolutely, because Wayne's age group is perfect too for that.
Naya's going to pay for us to come up there. And,
and hang out.
Take a trip to Alaska.
And all the associated.
That would be great.
That's required.
sounds like a move, you know.
I'm in Arizona, so I don't think we've had a winter get below what 60 degrees in the last.
No.
Oh my God, you guys! I'm looking at snow right now again.
We did get a new question from Andrew. Any suggestion on teaching HACCP specifically?
On HACCP?
Oh.
Yeah.
So I'll just start with my philosophy on HACCP. In general, I think, when it was, gosh, I'd have to think back 25 years ago when LA County, when I was working out there, when they first started really pushing HACCP as a philosophy in the health department, I think it was always kind of introduced as a standalone topic. But when we start looking at the ServSafe curriculum, we look at the Arizona state standards for culinary, we look at the ACF. It's really interesting. HACCP now is really relegated to just knowing what it is, knowing what it stands for, and knowing. But unless you're in an environment where they are following, and there are a lot of them, whether, especially now with buffets and with long-term care facilities, that sort of thing, there's definitely going to be that. But we, for what we teach, we really teach a very, on Bloom's taxonomy, probably only knowledge and understanding is all that's required. And I think that and we really only go as deep as what ServSafe requires at that point. However, I stand by my strategy that because HACCP is pretty in depth, especially when you get into high school kids, it's got to be chunked out. It's got to be repetition, but probably more than anything with HACCP, it's got to be applied. So like what Joey said, we would really want to implement the HACCP procedures into their classroom activity. So are they checking the temps? Do we have a list of correctives up for them? Are we keeping records, that sort of thing? So that
I'll
would be
tag on to you, Joe. Yeah. We at NECI, this is great info. At NECI, HACCP, I agree with you, Joe, 100% on your viewpoint of HACCP versus ServSafe. HACCP's much more complicated to teach, I think. A little more scientific. At NECI, when we did it, I have a couple examples. Sandals Resorts, when I train for them, they run off a HACCP program. They train their staff for 6 weeks off of a HACCP program before they enter their kitchens. At NECI, we incorporated HACCP only, Joe, with meat fab. And I'm sorry, Andrew, I think had the question. They only with meat fab. And so they really practice HACCP in the meat fabrication section of their course. And anybody who went through a culinary course got the meat fabrication sections. So it really, they understood it that way. I think in all the years of doing ServSafe that we sort of cover HACCP with ServSafe, you know, on top of it in an easier format, like you're saying, a more understandable, I want to say more palatable format to teach it, right?
Yeah.
So,
and to play off of that as well, you know, when we talk about simple things like cooling stocks and sauces, or, you know, ingredients through the guidelines, HACCP principles are applied to that because there are correctives. You know, if we have a stock that wasn't cooled properly, you know, we'll come in and we'll reheat it up to the right temperature and then break it down and cool it properly. That's a perfect real world example of monitoring and then offering a corrective. So we try to, I guess, as instructors, us knowing HACCP, it kind of just becomes a omnipotent part of the ServSafe content. I think it is, like Joey said, it's its own. You could take a college class on it, you know, a 9-week, 2 or 3 credit class.
yeah.
I think
exactly. Yeah, the military uses it. The Coast Guard uses it. When we taught the Coast Guard at NECI, we did a bunch of trainings with Coast Guard personnel from the sea schools, you know, and out in California. They teach it. All the cruise lines, all the cruise ships, if you get a job on a cruise ship, they're going to use that because the Coast Guard are basically their health inspectors, you know. So there's a lot of like technicalities, a lot of institutions that use it, bigger institutions. Every small mom and pop place or every smaller, Danielle Balloud's place uses ServSafe now. All of the, you know, big restaurants are in this country are using ServSafe. I want to say Europeans use HACCP probably more, obviously, National Restaurant Association, ServSafe. But I think the KP could be versatile for both. I do, if I think about it. I think KP curriculum could be taught to Spanish chefs, and they would understand, you know, that HACCP program based on the content you have in the program. So it's a versatile thing.
And not to put Nye on the technology spot here, but the one thing that I think Nye and his team has been good at, because we've brought this up a couple times throughout the years, is if we want to enhance content or if something changes with ServSafe or the industry is shifting, you know, it's a lot easier to get a hold of Nye or Jeff and get some content in real time edited or added. Correct, Nye? As far as
pretty much in real time.
Yeah, so I think that's an advantage to a platform like this.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of a digital publishing platform, especially a versatile one that doesn't have to go through a billion different committees. You know, so you call me,
right.
This change. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. No, or we usually keep our thumb really close to what they're doing, because whenever a new edition comes out, then within a week everything's updated. Yeah, exactly.
And you've always been really helpful, Nye, like when a student has a hard time logging in or something's happening, maybe they just don't understand it. You've been very, 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 very supportive of me and my students in that way. Because like I said, sometimes my students, to go back to Thomas with students with challenges, they don't understand what they're doing. Even a login can be very difficult for some of them, a simple login. So, we as the chefs may not be connected to what the actual issue is. And so every time I've emailed you, you've been boop, right on top of it. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. So there's 2 more additional questions that popped up during your HACCP explanation. Actually, one was a multi-part from Yvonne. I apologize if you're still here that I didn't answer the second part of the question. Well, first off, it's managers only, and second, the time frame for each module. Basically, it could be done in 2 weeks to really, it's designed like for a 9-week program to be done across a time span. But you could pace it. You could be as aggressive as you want with the modules. There's 10 chapters, and you could do 2 per day, 1 per week, or you could just slam them through it. Which of course, you can have varying degrees of success if you do that. And the second question was Josh actually says he used KP in this year with decent success. How do you? His question is, how do you get better student engagement? He said, we have had all of our students who have taken the ServSafe pass. How do you get better engagement? Which I guess for a pandemic year is the magic question is, and I've heard for other programs and things like that where they get like 1 to 10% engagement. So I think any engagement during a pandemic year is great. So how do you guys get better engagement during pandemic? And actually, let's look at the future after pandemic.
Well, I think the pandemic was a reality check thing. As good as we were as teachers, it was tested to the limit over, especially a year ago. And it was difficult. And I think what I learned, especially with KP, but with this specific content, is it's really hard for the kids to stay focused on it. Initially when I had developed our remote learning for this last year, and again, everything was done on the fly, but I took for granted their discipline and their motivation, and it became pretty apparent after the second week that it just doesn't work. And so I stand by the chunking of it out. I think my best success with KP is when it's not something I just do for a week straight, or it's not something I do, all at once. It's something that we kind of revisit throughout the year or throughout the quarter or the semester, and make it a part of what we're doing every day, but not making it the primary function. And that's the other reason why we switched to later in the year, towards the end of the year, to test, is I felt like if I make it a periodic thing, maybe once a week, that we visited KP and then some of that content, and then spent the rest of the week reinforcing what we visited, by the time we get to that 36th week, thereabouts, we've given them a pretty good cross section. So my advice, or what I've learned from it, is, especially with the high school kids or the younger students, but even to a certain degree, older students that are not traditional student age, is don't try to shove it down their throat like I did, assuming they would do it. It only works for a certain degree, and then I think it gets overwhelming. It gets a little bit monotonous for them. So I think the best way to keep the students engaged is to keep the variety.
I agree with you, Joe. I think you're right. It's self-discipline and motivation and those things that we fight. I mean, that was huge for me when I lost my students to COVID, 14 of them, and then said, oh, what do we do with them? Teach them online. And that was I'm sure for you guys too, a struggle. So at first, and so KP really helped through that. But we also incentivize our students as much as we can to pass the situation, really pump them up as adults. They're 18 and older. So for me, I can say to them, this is really good for you. It's really good for your career. It's really good for your own discipline, because they're kind of working on that consciously in my class. So it's a little different, but I did fight that, the motivation, the discipline, and I do it every day. As soon as they walk out the door, I'm like, okay, they're not going to do it. So the other day, all three of my students came in and I said, have you all logged into KP yet? And they looked at me and they go, oh, well, and I said, okay, don't do it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, and like walked away. And they were like, oh, wow, she's really like disappointed that I didn't do it. And I am, because it wastes my breath if they don't do it. Now they're all logged in and they've all done it and they're working on it, but it's like that. Sometimes you have to kind of play like that. It's hard.
Well, and one of the I think unintended positive byproducts of the pandemic is it put a lot of school districts and learning communities into a better footing technology-wise, and of course the issues. So we have leveraged that with our learning management system. Even though we are live, I pretty much run everything through our learning management system online. So when we're in the classroom, they may have their laptop or they may have their device, and they're doing the quizzes right then. And KP can work the same way. It's mobile device friendly. So if the students, maybe it's not just, okay, go home and do this and then we'll come back.
Right.
We're doing it in the classroom, and it almost becomes more of a digital textbook or digital classroom resource. And I think
which is
probably
I love that. I did the same thing with mine. I decided to incorporate a half hour of adult learning time for KP study in my class for the 2 weeks prior to their exam date. So they get to do it themselves and create self-discipline, because that's huge for my students. I can't control what they do outside of there, but they have to start getting into a regimen, that's part of the behavioral shift with mine. But they definitely have that time in class too, which I was going to say, that creating that space, that time for them in the classroom with that digital tool is so important as well. So, yeah.
Great. Now with that final question, we haven't had any new ones. We had a lot of thank you. So, thank you, Joe and Joey, for being a part of this discussion. Sorry, Wayne couldn't be here, but he's actually in class right now, teaching his middle schoolers, wrangling them. As we probably think he is. No, he does a great job. So with that, this presentation is not over, because the three of them continue this discussion. So if you want to stick around and listen to a lively internal Q&A of them quizzing Wayne, how the heck do you do it? Because that's what it turned out to be. And actually, Joey, and Joe, you guys shared a lot of wonderful additional strategies and things that came up. They didn't come up during this Q&A. So with that being said, Mary, do you want to take it away and continue on this wonderful discussion that we had previously with Wayne?
Thank you, and I appreciate the time. I'm off to class myself, so
I'm off to a meeting too.
Yay.
Thanks, guys. But I hope it was helpful. Thanks, Nye.
Each of you brought up different things that each other talked about. So let's go ahead and continue this talk, and talk about what you learned from Wayne, from Joey, from Joe, and just like let's just have a fireside chat. So
cool.
Well, Joe, you're muted currently. God love Zoom.
There you go. All right, now you can hear me. Yeah. Wayne, I have a question. You brought up some really impressive data, and I'm probably going to be hitting you up pretty good once we hang up from this call. But so I just want to clarify, you do test them multiple times or twice, I would imagine. They don't pass the first time?
Yes, we test them the first time around the third week of March, and then we go on spring break after having results in hand, because we always do computer-based tests.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second test would be like the second week of April. And we do that because if for some reason we need that third test date, we have to, as you know, you got to wait 60 days, ServSafe requirement. So that puts us around June 10th, the last day of school. And there was 1 year we had to test one student on the very last day of school to get her through. So we pay for the test only once at the district level. The second and third time, the school site has to pay for the test.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll give them up to 3.
Well, that was my next question, was the funding. And then, not to monopolize, but my last question, because I love how you are doing the self-directed kind of jigsawing of the students creating their own content and then presenting it. Do they have access to technology? Is that provided by the school, or is there like a computer lab, or how does that work?
Yes, so a couple of things. So in a non-COVID year, I personally do have a lab. My agri-science lab's got 14 desktop computers, and then I have a laptop cart with 14. So they have the technology. Now, starting March of last year and and this whole school year, of course, because of the pandemic, every student in Miami-Dade schools was given a laptop.
Okay.
They were given like a $600 laptop with the whole Microsoft Office 365 program. So yes, every student had access as long as they had internet.
Okay.
That's awesome.
No, I mean, it's really cool to see, and it gives hope, because I know junior high kids, probably not as well as you, but I know them, and if you can get them at that success rate, there's definitely room for us to improve.
Well, but the way I look at it, your kids have a lot going on. You know, we know Joey's do, and even high school kids, you know, they have boyfriends, girlfriends, they have jobs, they have AP classes, college classes, dual enrollment. You know, I don't really have to compete with anything. You know, they're excited to get a license and know that they can get a job at Publix.
No, but I want to say that too. Like I'll ditto what Joe's saying. I mean, to start that at the age you're doing, it's discipline, it's responsibility, it's all those great things that we have as mentors and teachers for years try to instill, right, Joe? And people that are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19,
well, and you're getting
35 right now, you know,
Right.
never learned it. And honestly, we need to start somewhere, and I don't care if it's one student at a time. That's fantastic. Thank you, Wayne.
Now, and my last question, Wayne, and then I promise
on that really quick is, so what you're saying is we need to start up in the junior high level, but I'd be curious to see like how the students do in the schools that you feed to, the high schools, when they go for culinary arts, and how their performance is, because that's just basically sets a lifelong path of success, right?
Yeah, well, what's been happening is if they feed into a high school that offers the program or the exam, you know, it's a 5-year exam. So the students are telling me that the teachers are giving them additional duties. They're moving them up levels. They're giving them like they're making them like micromanagers in the kitchen, training the others. So I don't know of anyone personally that has retaken it in high school. None of mine have told me that they took it in high school again.
Well, they wouldn't need it till, if they're 12 years old, it wouldn't be till 17, 18. So if it was, it would be literally right when they graduate. But when you're when you're doing these units, Wayne, is it dedicated, or are you doing other topics in parallel to it? So
no, it's complementary. I've got a food lab, and there's a lot going on in there. You know, the teacher faculty luncheons, we do a lot of recruitment where we invite middle elementary families and students over, so they're always cooking. And then starting about February, when we get into the winter season in Miami, there's a lot of competition, so they're always preparing for, like, I would say February till the end of the year, there's some competition on the docket where they have to actually cook something and go serve it. And like the fair, the Miami-Dade County Fair and Expo, they do teams of 4 cooking in front of live audiences. So this is complimentary, and that only helps because they see the benefit. You know, when they're going to take 500 ceviches and serve them, you know, 8 hours later at an event in downtown Miami, and they have to start cooking the shrimp and the tomato sauce the Saturday before. You know, all those things that we teach are coming all together, and they see it. You know, let me tell you, it's easy to cool soup down to 41 in a few hours, but shrimp, without ruining it, turning them one by one onto that metal pan over the ice. I mean, they see it.
Yeah, no pressure.
And it's contextual, you know, so they actually, even they can reflect on that prior experience and visualize it when they're in the testing situation or in the learning situation. Just like you said, it's like, okay, guys, remember when we did the shrimp for the ceviche? Remember how, you know, difficult it was, or how important it was, because that essentially is a ready-to-eat food from the get-go. It's not going to get cooked again.
Yeah. We could get it to 55 degrees, no problem, but going from 55 to 41 was not easy.
Right, in that time. So it really gives them, and that's one of the things that we've benefited from as well. We'll pull a 40-gallon batch of stock, and just based on our conversation, the kids make it, it's second nature for us, but they'll break it down into the 5-gallon buckets, they'll ice it down, we have somebody that's designated to stir, and they will check that temp after that first hour, and it's almost a point of pride if they can get it to the mark that they want. Yeah, so I mean, we all experience it. It doesn't matter if it's 12-year-old or a 16-year-old, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, my kitchen's the same way. Yeah, my kitchen's very hands-on in that fact that we're producing food constantly. We actually still feed people in need. We fed homeless people for a year.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So, we fed the homeless housed in hotels in central Vermont for a year through Capstone. We were called to action during a crisis, of course. And then we did a contract with the state for 4 months while I was teaching my students online and doing shorter sessions during COVID to get them graduated. But we do about 150 meals a week on top of that are special meals on top of what we produce for the shelf. So I probably use 13,000 pounds of food in a session, depending on what's going on. But they're constantly refurbishing food too. So they see the difference between food that's gone bad, food that hasn't. They use their sandy buckets. They have the right color cutting boards. They're matching that. And they love it when they say, Chef, the adults even, Chef, look at me. I remembered my ServSafe. And they point it out to me,
Right.
because they're adults, right, that have been through trauma. So they want to say, look at me when they do something good. And I always say, oh, that's awesome. See, you're connecting the dots. And when they can physically do it, hear it, see it, witness it, this is where KP comes in with the hearing and the audio and the interaction of the video game for these adults and people with challenges really helps. It's amazing. So, yeah, I think we all have, with those different demographics, reasons for using KP and ServSafe like that, for sure.
I'm curious, Joe, how many of yours actually go on and try to work as soon as they get that exam in their hand? Is it a major goal for most of them? Like, oh, wow, I can now go get a job.
Well, it all kind of works together. Absolutely. We have students, and to more your point, we have students that come in with it sometimes because they've already got a job or they got it when they were younger. But depending on where they are in the food chain of the job that they're at, it's not really required. Maricopa County, which encompasses kind of Metro Phoenix, they changed a few years ago their whole food handler certification management, and they basically put it on the onus of the operators. And so they basically we use, everyone kind of uses it, but what I tell the students when they get it and they go interview for a job, it's worth 50 cents an hour, $1 an hour more, and you can justify that, when you go in. And our advisory council and our community partners, they love it because they know even if the kid isn't going to be in a supervisory role, especially with the Native American casinos that we have that are always hiring, it's just one less person you'd have to worry about, when it comes to that. So by the time, if the students do it right, by the time they leave our program, they've got their ServSafe, they got their ACF certification, and then they have their certificate of completion from Scottsdale Community College through dual enrollment. And they would have all of that basically in the 2 years and then they would graduate high school. So
Wow.
Yeah, we're and that's a perfect world. And but the students generally are pretty motivated because it's about money, if they can earn $15, $16 versus 13 or 14 just by proving that they can pass this test, a lot of times that motivates them pretty well.
Great.
I want to say something really quickly about the high school students that come in, Joe, to you that have their certification already, just as a kind of a thing. We used to do that with NECI, right? So in a post-secondary education format, we would take students from technical centers, obviously, that were ServSafe certified prior. We would, like you said, Wayne, give them other tasks or do something to do or, have something cool to do for them.
Right.
But we actually decided that training them through the class was the best thing, because ServSafe does update itself quite often. And sometimes we wouldn't make them take the exam again, but they would sit through the class and learn the new information in order to be as up to date as possible when they went to study for that again. That was just something I wanted to suggest.
Well, and that's a good balancing act, because especially with human behavior, some of these kids think I don't need to pay attention, and I already got it, and that sort of thing. So we do try to balance a little bit of both. I mean, we all have those students that kind of rise above, whether they have the certification or not. But when you have somebody that does have that certificate, and it's one thing to have it, but it's another to practice it, and
Exactly.
And when we have those, we kind of put some more onus on them as far as being almost our sanitation manager. They'll be the one that goes and checks the temps on the dish machines, or maybe the titration on the 3-comp sinks or something. You give them a responsibility that in the real world we don't have the luxury of having, but in a teaching environment we can literally designate somebody every 30 minutes to change out the sinks, or to delegate that. So just finding even just small snippets of authority, or advanced responsibility,
that kind of stuff. And cleaning lists and all those checklists. I had to rewrite my program for COVID safety rules too, and I want to say that I am so grateful to be a certified chef from ServSafe when COVID hit.
Absolutely.
Right? Didn't you guys feel that way? Like, I was like, whoa, like, I'm so glad I have this certificate,
Well, I felt like we were probably more well-equipped than virtually any other program on our campus to handle COVID, because really the only we only did 3 things different. We brought in a different chemical to make sure it was COVID lethal. We changed our social distancing. Our school invested in a lot of plexiglass partitions, and then purchased
things on the floors,
a lot more tables, and then the personal protective, the face mask. Other than that, we kind of walked through almost in a HACCP format the reality of COVID and what we were doing. And because COVID's no different than norovirus or a Hep A or anything, as far as killing it and protecting it with regards to food service. That's why it was one of the lowest transmission rates is through food and beverage. So we were already equipped, right? We already know what we're doing. And I can't tell you, especially, Nye, with one of the really benefits of KP, which you and I have talked about in the past, is it's real-time updated. You guys can pretty much go in and update it almost real time. And so COVID can become a relevant piece of it. We were using it in our discussions because it was, again, with students, you're trying to connect to them some way and trying to have them visualize it. And COVID kind of gave us this in now with a microorganism that we could all relate to. And, KP is an example of they're pretty agile because they can just go in. I think it's Jeff that'll go in there and update it or do something. Mm-hmm. And then it's done. You don't have to wait for the next publication of the book. You don't have to do anything else. So I think that's a really valuable piece as well.
I think it felt like, for me, in my experience, because I'm working with many adults of many different facets and coworkers in a community action agency, when the pandemic hit, I was the calmest person in the circle of it. I just put my head down straight forward and felt calm and confident from the education. Sorry, little dog. From the education that, really, really helped me stay focused and do it. Sorry, hang on, I'm muting.
Yeah, my dog was barking just a minute ago too. Maybe that triggered it. No, yeah, that's really cool. We were prepared. I mean, other than maybe somebody in the medical programs.
Right.
Yeah, no, in my particular case, I'm actually not face-to-face with students this year at all. Even the ones that are in the building are just really on a computer. There's no interaction. There's no cooking allowed or trips. Just the way we are in Miami-Dade yet. We were one of the hardest hit areas in Florida. So we started late. But I'm getting from the kids all the neat stuff that's happening in their houses and they're applying this, and they're telling me that their parents are being driven crazy by the students telling them all the things they need to start doing in their kitchen because they're finally cooking in the kitchen again.
Right.
That's a big family, right? So
Yeah.
that's interesting to hear, that there's some transfer there into the family.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful. I mean, I think it really does boost confidence when they understand or pass a test on KP. They pass that little work thing. They come into class the next day, even the adults, and say, 45-year-olds, Chef, I did it. I made it through that KP thing. And it makes them feel good, just to get that good grade on that little section. It's awesome.
Yeah,
I
learning
wanted to
chef
ask-
is good, positive.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask Joey what kind of effect that has on your students when they're serving the homeless.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of them are high functioning, so they must understand the significance of that and must make them feel really good.
Yeah. And what's crazy is like it could be 5 students now, and 3 of them were homeless at one point.
Wow.
One of my students said to me, this is amazing. This is going to blow your mind. One of my students is a TBI survivor. So he's a traumatic brain injury survivor, and he's wonderful. And there's delay, and he's awesome. But he asked me the other day, he said, Chef, my mom and I were in the motels last summer in transition when we were moving our houses. And he said to me, did you feed us? And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh my goodness, the food was so good. So I got like this direct
feedback.
criticism or for my food. And I was like, wow, and I didn't have students at that time. It was me and my teaching assistant packing 400 meals a day, so it was pretty intense, but it was so great. So it really does have an impact with what they do, because they think about, and for what I do as a chef, it's like, are they going to take it? Are they going to heat it up? Are they going to put it on the engine of a car? Are they going to take it to their campsite and not be able to heat it up? Are they going to eat it in a motel room and maybe half heat it in a microwave? So it really adjusts the whole cooking process to keep the food safe. And so we really, bring things up to those proper temperatures of 165 and then really cool them down. And we make foods that we know will have longer shelf lives. I try to include protein and, but lots of vegetarian stuff for that reason too, like for less fat and things like that could go bad. But, they practice it constantly. They have to, especially with COVID in my workspace. We have to wear masks, stay out of the other workspace. There's other people in the building. We have to respect that. There's all kinds of things. But Vermont's doing pretty good with vaccinations now. So things are starting to relax a little bit with people's attitudes. But they're still practicing in my kitchen and in the food shelf and in Capstone, which creates a longer environment and a constant one. What they do when they leave is tough for me. My students have a lot of challenges, but I feel really good about the last 3 groups and how well they've done. So it's cool. Awesome. We package every day food with labels, how to reheat, how to not reheat. Hopefully it works. But once it goes out with food banks and food shelves, you guys, it's tough,
Yeah, I applaud you, Joey. I mean, what you're doing there, it's so. I mean, every teacher is rewarding, but you got that really special group.
I couldn't believe that I got that feedback from Keenan and his mom, like having to leave one apartment and going to another one and being in transition and being housed with homeless when you're not really homeless. But then coming to my class and that full circle thing was crazy. It's great how that happens. It's resourcing food is a challenge too. So we get food that is maybe 1 or 2 days away from the use by date. So explaining that in a use by versus a good by, or is it actually bad, is a whole other thing. That's a food labeling thing that people don't really understand, is that a use by date, depending on what the food is, could be that food could last another 4 or 5 or 6 days. That takes a whole other, took me a lot of study and a lot of training to do that. The first, going from Necky gourmet chefing, right? And then teaching gourmet chefing, go to school with Elton Brown, and then going to a food shelf, which helped, the scientific education I had from Necky really helped me understand the length that food can live if you take care of it, So we'll get beets that have chew marks from raccoons, you guys. And are we going to use those from a local organic farm that's been cleaned or been gleaned, right? So I'll get 50 pounds of red beets. Out of those 50 pounds, 20 pounds of them might be half usable. So how do we clean them? How do we process them? How do we make sure that they're sanitary and good for, and we cook those, of course, we would never serve them raw, but you know what I mean? It's like those kind of things. It might sound crazy, but we also waste 180 billion tons of food a year in this country. It's ridiculous, that number. So how do we train our youth to understand, and people to understand, how to feed their families well nutritionally and utilize all of that product at the same time? There's a lot of factors to my job for sure, but it's challenging and it's awesome. And when you see the success rates, I had a student that was in prison from the age of 19 to 41, and he got out of CKA, great cook, went and worked for a Necky chef who ran a resort, and then gained the skills he needed to show up for work on time and be back in society, and the confidence and the strength, and just got himself a sales job, doing great in Williston, own apartment, doing his thing, and utilized all those programs that we pay for through state and taxes and whatever we do, and utilize them really well. So it's great to see those success stories,
Awesome.
Yeah.
This is such a great group. I love the diversity and the different levels. And you guys, and the best part is you guys are learning from each other.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're not in your own little cohorts because, we're all teaching.
I got to ask you a question, Joe. Sorry, no problem. Joe, how do you manage 90 students in a half? I'm like, how do you teach them in a half-hour section?
Okay,
I have 5 students in 6 hours.
So basically, I need to clarify that there's actually 4 instructors working at the same time. We have 2 instructional assistants, and we teach 2 blocks a day. So we have the student for 2.5 hours, 5 days a week, and they have a choice to come in the AM or in the PM.
I gotcha.
So that makes it like, oh yeah, now I get it. So in the context of KP or ServSafe, kind of getting back to that for a moment, having that chunk of time really gives us flexibility, because we could spend literally 45 minutes just on KP content or just on content that we're working on, and then we can still have time, another hour and 15 minutes to do a lab. And so a lot of times the labs that I do are more appropriate to an hour and a half, because I do like to have some time in the classroom.
I was going to ask that. If
yeah,
you gave them time in the classroom. Yeah.
So a lot of times we can, I try to break it up into 2 to 3 different segments. If you try to go 2.5 hours all in one thing, you lose the kids, whether it be 2.5 hours of lecture or even 2.5 hours of a lab. They peter out. So you got to kind of keep it changing up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the attention span is the hard part, right, you guys? Because I remember teaching 20 years ago, and it was 10 minutes or 8 minutes or 6, and now it's 4 or 5, even for adults too. So or less, 50 seconds. Right. Thank you. You're the one that would be up to date most on that. Right. And I might be behind. I am old.
I don't know. I feel behind most of the time. It's like I'm
just like a TikTok.
Really? Is that true? 50 seconds? Really?
No, it's not. But
oh my God, it feels like that.
Look at TikTok. I mean, their videos are 30 seconds long.
Well, I mean, look at social media, right? It's 30 seconds or 144 characters. If you can't get it done in that, you almost lose it. So I find that my presentation, if I do a demo video, ironically, it's like, we used to look for videos that were about 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I can't go more than 2.5 minutes with a video if it's a demo video or anything. You lose the kids. You literally, even if it's something they're interested in, after about 2 to 3 minutes, and that's with me stopping it and explaining something or kind of re-engaging them, it's really a challenge.
Yeah, interesting. I have to throw a lot of, for my adults in lecture and things like that, I have to throw a lot of relevant examples in, like, what were you doing at home last night with your dishes and this and that, and to kind of keep it life oriented for them to connect it all.
Right.
How's the attention span at your place, Wayne?
Well, names. At middle school, names are the biggest thing. It took me years to learn this, but my roughest kids in the class, and for some reason they were the rough girls, right, that I would have a hard time with. If you just start saying their name, just say their name as many times as you can during a class period. That's all they want to hear is you saying their name. So when we're developing questions, I didn't share the review, right? But we call them Worthley questions, and the kids hate them because they're really hard, right? They're 10 times harder than the ServSafe questions.
Yeah.
But you use their names, you know. Alfredo is having a party, and he invited Susie and Jane and Alejandra. Use their names and create a scenario, right? And then so-and-so took the chicken out of the oven and put it on the table. When they see a question and they see their names, you got them. You can write a whole paragraph and they'll read it. So little tricks, you know, you learn the little tricks that we all learn as we get more experience.
Yeah, teaching my person with Down syndrome was great, making soup. And they have their own like special way of like processing, meaning they'll start singing or they'll move around, you know. And he was using a tilt skillet, you guys, for the first time, and with the hose, you know, to fill up it with water and this and that. He started singing "Row, row, row your soup," and so I jumped right in and we sang "Row, row, row your soup." But it's true. I think those creative, doesn't matter if you have Down syndrome or not, or if you're just, you know, okay, or a stellar student, even, you might just, those creative ways of pulling them in, like you said, of creating stories or making it a fun activity. It doesn't matter what age group, it works. It's interesting. Yeah.
Incredible. So how long do you have, Wayne, in your class period? That 2.5 hours must sounds like a luxury to you.
Well, it would depend on the student, obviously, right? But we're 88 minutes a period.
Okay, so you're not the 45 like most.
Yeah, 88 minutes. We're on a block. So because I have them in agri-science and food science, I've got them every day. So every day, 88 minutes.
Okay, so that's not bad. So yeah.
No, you can really break up. You can get enough done in the food lab in 88 minutes if you're, you know, you got to think about what you're doing, obviously. And if it's a big recipe, you just got to do it over 2 or 3 days.
Right. And do the step by step, like I was saying too, for preparation of food that's going out. You have to do like this long step by step process.
Yeah, because I can't lie to you guys. We know an 88-minute food lab, 40 of that minute is cleanup. We know that.
Yeah.
Well, you're preaching to the choir there. But I will say though, if you are doing a multiple day, which we will do too, even though I could do it in one day, but because of what we do, that still incorporates a lot of the ServSafe principles with regards to handling ready-to-eat foods, or, you know, cooling things down or reheating things, or, you know, why are we assembling when we're assembling it the way we're assembling it type thing. So.
Yeah, using of leftovers is a big thing for me too. So if we make a batch of fried chicken, for example, we might have 5 pieces left. What do we do with those 5 pieces to incorporate them in another dish, you know, and not waste that food, but also make it safe for somebody to eat. So yeah, I feel like now that I've had this conversation, I'm really aware, like more extra aware of how often I'm actually using ServSafe practices in an everyday sentence, probably. I want to ask you guys as teachers though, do you use the ServSafe diagnostic tests at all? Like those, they have diagnostic tests that are paper form. Do you use those with your students too?
Yes, but I don't put a lot of weight on them anymore. I used to put more weight, but not so much, because they have seemed to not update the content that frequently.
Right. Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Joe, do you use them? No.
Not so much. Same as what Wayne was saying. And again, not to keep sounding like a broken record, but one of the advantages with KP is having the real-time updates and not worrying about a published date or an edition. And a lot of times we use Canvas as a learning management system. So we're using that in conjunction with, you know, we'll use that with KP. And sometimes it's just easier for me to create a quiz that supports what they're doing anyway.
That's what I do. I create and customize my own quiz questions. Yeah, it's easier.
Yeah, and just to mention from my standpoint, you know, we also have, you know, AI-driven analytics on the questions. So when Joe, you pull up the question, or Wayne, or any of you pull up the questions that they miss, you can tell the level of how bad it is. So it's like, are they really bad at it, or are they somewhat bad at it, or they did just make a mistake? You know.
Right.
Yeah. So that analytics definitely helps out a lot with that. Aspect, you know, at least, you know, the weight or the value of that question. Oh, so it looks like Joe, you're connecting again. Oh, cool.
Oh, he changed.
You changed to a new.
Yeah, I switched to Rue here. You can hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
No, so
Move around. I'm
yeah.
hearing you.
No, this is a great discussion. I mean, lots of valuable stuff that I learned from each of you because I think out of all of you, I've had the most extensive conversations with Wayne because of how unique his situation is. I know there's other middle schools to do it, but you've been doing it the longest that I know of, as far as like ServSafe and KP. So it's crazy.
Yeah, it was just one of those things. We said, let's do this, and a lot of people came together and we kind of designed a program. And then I'm not even sure, Nye, how I got involved with you. I really can't even remember.
It was Diane Collingwood who said, "Hey, we got this program. Nye's got it. Who wants to be a guinea pig?" And you raised your hand. And you're like, "I'll try it." You had no idea what we did specifically. But
she was actually supposed to. She just texted me, Diana Collingwood. I don't know if you can see Diana in my phone. Diana.
Yeah.
She's supposed to come here tonight, but she didn't leave the Virgin Islands.
Great. I mean, she retired from the district office, but she so she brought it to you because she knew what we did, and she said, well, if some of our teachers can actually use this, then we're gonna
Well, I'll have to thank her next time I see her because I totally forgot how it happened. But I'm glad you shared that.
It was the first year we actually launched it because we didn't have ServSafe before that. We were just strictly culinary arts, and then I told her, hey, we got this new thing. It's supposed to make ServSafe easier. She's like,
great.
Okay. And then so that's how you got into this, because before it didn't exist really. I mean,
right.
We didn't have it. You guys didn't have the program.
Nope.
So it was like basically we launched it at the same time in Miami. And you took to it really well. I mean, so I'm glad that it worked out because honestly, when she first said middle school, I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that really going to be successful?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have my doubts, honestly, because I know the material. I know how challenging it is.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, Joe, at high school, they should have the cognitive level to be able to handle that. I mean, Joey, you have a different group, but they should be academically prepared for.
Some of my students have bachelor's degrees, you guys, in nutrition. They just fell off track for a little while, so it doesn't take long for them to come right back to it. For sure. So yeah.
I would love for you guys to advocate for hazard pay for us. It would be great.
Yeah. I'm hearing that. I know. But no, I like the KP a lot, and I thank you so much. I'm so glad we met each other at that food show years ago, or that school show. It was actually it was a college fair or something. It was great.
Yeah, something like that. I think it was CAFÉ actually. It could be. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I don't remember exactly the specific event, but I remember finding your booth.
I think it was Niagara Falls. I'm guessing. No, maybe not.
I think it was Niagara. Yeah, I think you're right.
I remember that. Yeah, and you're like, this is
cool. Yeah, it was really cool, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to finally use it. I tried to, Necky taught its own curriculum, and I tried to get.
Well, everyone has their own ways, and it's hard to get change. I know that. So, all right. Well, if does anyone else have any other questions for each other? You guys are just a great group to have a conversation with.
Well, I could probably go on all night, but I know
yeah, me too, guys. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you're heading home, right?
Likewise.
Well, I gotta go.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, it was
pleasure
great
to meet you, Wayne.
And I'd like to, through Nye, if we can figure out a way to maybe connect, because there's a couple more things, maybe collaborate a little bit. It would be great.
Sure.
No, absolutely.
You all have each other's emails, so you can start talking behind my back now.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate it, Nye, bringing us together.
Yes.
Maybe.
And if you need anything like this again, just ask. We could do this. We could have open talk forums anytime. So I'm happy to spend an hour doing that anytime.
Yeah. Well, I know this was originally supposed to be only 20 minutes, so but yeah,
well, you know,
once we get a good powwow together, and you can tell this dynamic is pretty awesome. You know, yeah, we could probably be chatting by our fireside with a good glass of wine for the next 2-3 hours if we were together.
I'm sure.
To the day when we
I'm
can get
sure.
together.
Stay safe with COVID, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes, you too. It was nice meeting and talking with all of you. I look forward to the next chance.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, y'all have a good night, and thank you so much for participating.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nye. Thanks for KP.
Thank you for being a user. Thank you. And I'd like to thank to those of you who stuck around and watched the entirety of this video. Like I said earlier, the original section, which was the panel, was only 20 minutes long, and the open discussion was planned for however long they wanted to talk, and we went on for an additional 40 minutes or so. So it was a fun time, and I hope you enjoyed your time here. This will be on YouTube, so check the description for links of things that they talked about and resources that we provided here. And be sure to like this video, and obviously if you like it, please subscribe. And thanks again for watching this 1 hour long discussion on ServSafe for managers and getting those kids from 8th grade on up to 45, 55 certified with this industry certification.